The Daily Bible in chronological order. New International Version Bible. Peter again denies. Matthew chapter 26 verses 69 through 72. Mark chapter 14 verses 66 through 78. And Luke chapter 22 verses 55 through 58. John chapter 18 verse 25. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another girl saw him and said to the people, "There, this fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath. "I don't know the man." A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. Before Caiaphas and counsel. Matthew chapter 26 verses 59 through 66. Mark chapter 14 verses 55 through 64. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another, not made by man.' Yet even then their testimony did not agree." Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus. "And you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Jesus is abused. Matthew chapter 26 verses 67 and 68. Mark chapter 14 verse 65. Luke chapter 22 verses 63 through 65. The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, "Prophesy, who hit you?" They said many other insulting things to him. Peter denies still again. Matthew chapter 26 verses 73 and 74a. Mark chapter 14 verses 70b and verse 71. Luke chapter 22 verses 59 and 60a. And John chapter 18 verses 26 and 27. After a little while, about an hour later, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them, for your account gives you away." Then he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. "Didn't I see you with him in the olive grove?" Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Peter weeps. Matthew chapter 26 verses 74b and verse 75. Mark chapter 14 verse 72 and Luke chapter 22 verses 60b and verse 62. Jesus, as he was speaking, just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. Counsel condemns Jesus. Matthew chapter 27 verse 1. Mark chapter 15 verse 1a. Luke chapter 22 verses 66 through 71. This is early on Thursday morning. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them. "If you are the Christ," they said, "tell us." Jesus answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe me. And if I ask you, you would not answer. But from now on the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God." They all asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He replied, "You are right in saying I am." Then they said, "Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips." Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. Judas commits suicide. Matthew chapter 27, verses 3 through 10. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. "I have sinned," he said, "for I have betrayed innocent blood." "What is that to us?" they replied. "What's your responsibility?" So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priest picked up the coins and said, "It is against the law to put this into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the field of blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 silver coins, the price set on him by the people of Israel. They used them to buy the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me.